The modern electric grid is an engineering marvel. In the U.S., it connects to 7,300 major power plants through nearly 160,000 miles of high-voltage transmission lines and millions of miles of low-voltage lines, coordinating with about 3,000 different utility companies to bring power to over 150 million customers. But as impressive as that is, it's an outdated system.
If Thomas Edison woke up today and looked at the electric grid, he would still recognize it.
Basically, our grid was made for a world that runs on fossil fuels, a world of giant energy producers and the consumers dependent on them. The United States power grid began to take shape in the 1880s when Thomas Edison opened the country's first central power plant, Manhattan's Pearl Street Station. While it initially served just 85 customers and powered 400 lamps, it expanded rapidly, and Edison's company went on to build similar electric grids in neighboring states. Competition sprung up, and by 1914, about 30% of all manufacturing activity relied on electricity, and 43 states had implemented regulatory commissions to oversee utility companies, which were fast becoming monopolies. By 1929, about 70% of manufacturing activity relied on electricity, and in 1935, the industry became federally regulated. As demand for electricity grew, utilities connected their transmission systems, allowing them to transport power across regional and state lines. Today, the lower 48 states are actually divided into 3 grids, the Eastern, Western, and Texas interconnections. But while the system has gotten more integrated, the fundamental technology has remained largely unchanged.
Our current grid is essentially a one-way, dumb system where electrons are simply moved from points of generation, whether it's a coal plant, hydro, nuclear, or solar, sent generally long distances across high voltage lines to nodes that are the interface between the inter and intrastate transmission system and then the distribution grid that steps down the voltage from the high voltage to the lower efficiency but easier to manage voltage that we send to our homes and businesses.
About 38% of utility-scale electricity in the U.S. comes from natural gas, 23% from coal, 20% from nuclear, and about 18% from renewables. While the renewable share is growing, today's grid just wasn't designed with wind and solar in mind, and it definitely wasn't designed for the significant amount of distributed generation we see with solar panels today. Millions of people with solar on their roofs are now producing excess power when it's sunny out. Many are selling that energy back to the grid.
Across the country, in utility after utility, what's become fringe is the idea that you might build another coal plant, right? No one is really doing that today.
The surge in solar installations has been driven by a steep decrease in the price of photovoltaics, the technology that powers solar panels for both residential and utility scale use. Since the 1970s, costs have dropped tremendously.
So solar went from essentially the most expensive form to one of the cheapest. Back then, solar on the ground was about $5 a watt, so 50 cents or more per kilowatt hour. And solar is down now today in the best large commercial applications at 1 to 2 cents, so a factor of 50 reduction. And on rooftop systems, if you finance it right and you're in a good location, your effective cost can be under 10 cents.
What we know is that utility after utility is now sourcing wind and solar instead of sourcing coal and natural gas.
In the meantime, expect to see solar installations continue to rise as prices fall and incentives and regulations spur development.
5 years from now, it will be a little bit odd to see new homes that don't have solar on the roof. It'll just become part of the landscape. At the end of the day, this is an inexorable march toward a transition to a zero carbon economy.